Good morning. So I sent the photo for the week, a little bit of a visual. If you'd like to, if you've not looked at it and wouldn't mind doing so, I would appreciate it. Or you may already have looked at it and seen it. Rhonda Ray, she doesn't know why I sent this one. I didn't tell her. She was curious about the one for this week. So if you look at it, now of course, certain people in that photo will look very familiar, where the purpose isn't to discuss that. The question I'll ask you is, who stands out in the photo? Yeah, the fella in the cutoff shirt. You can't help. You didn't know who it was. Yeah, he's pretty famous. But anyway, he seems terribly out of place, doesn't he? But he sure doesn't seem to be in any way, shape, or form bothered by it, does he? And I cropped off part of the picture. If you saw his complete ensemble, he's very much not in line with the other individuals. Now, I would assume, I don't know for sure, but you kind of would make the chuckled assumption that he did that on purpose. That's what I would probably assume, but I really don't know if that's the case. But I would say he knows where he was supposed to be, and he was proving, who knows what his point was. Maybe it was for comedy or whatever. But if you took the photo at face value, let's pretend that this was just average Joes, just the people in a setting or a situation. You could look at a situation and it could appear that he was not prepared for the event that he was attending, wouldn't it? If you compare him to the people around him, would you say that? He doesn't appear to be prepared when you compare him to the other people around him. He stands out. Now, again, for sake of example, we'll say maybe he wasn't prepared for that. And so this lesson idea that I got today in that photo, thinking about, aside from he may have done this based on who we know is in the photo, for comedy or for effect or for some, who knows why, I don't know. He may have had a deep reason why he did it. I don't know, and I don't really care. The point is, he stands out because he's he's not ready for what was supposed to happen at that event. So this lesson idea came to me. It was one day this week, and it happened while I was texting Brother Kendall from Alabama. He and I were just doing some communication there. We do, off and on. And so I shared with him a little incident that happened to me this week. And I thought he might find it somewhat amusing. And so where I live, there is a section of the yard that's very steep. And I don't make pretense. There are these men in life. Oh, I can do it. Go ahead, buddy. Go ahead. It's your health and your life if you don't do it successfully. I don't fall prey to that stereotype or those ego issues. But I like a challenge. And so there's this section of the yard where we live that's very steep. And I've gotten braver and braver with my attempts to try and tackle part of that. So though I don't fall prey to the hardcore stereotype of it, I still like to try to attempt things. I'm a human being. So this week I got really brave. Rhonda Ray. And I was doing well until this one section of that piece of the yard. And I had myself all fixed. I got my body propped to counterbalance the mower. And the way it was leaning, man, I had my body ready. And I took off. And I slid right off that mower. And I have a reason why. That's what's funny. Rhonda Ray, now, is the mower okay? No, I'm kidding. She didn't say that. But she joked that she was worried. She's like, can you redo it so I can see it? I'm like, no, honey, that's not happening. But I mean, it was funny. I smacked the ground. And I chuckled because it just was funny. It was stupid. Well, here's something you don't know. And I should have been prepared. I should have had more sense. I was wearing these slick, like, I guess they'd be like an athletic pant. And the seat is slick, hard plastic. Now, I had myself propped and ready. And I've gotten better at this one section. And now I don't go as far as someone else would, and I'm not an idiot. I'm not trying to prove a point. So I was sitting there, And I was all propped over with what I was wearing. And I slid right off. I mean, I just like I was going down a slide. And it was, Brother Kendall mentioned he would love to have had a video of the event. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Rhonda Ray's like, she missed it. But he mentioned in we were texting, he was like, and he was being, I don't know, maybe kind of serious. He said, you might be able to turn that into a Sunday school lesson. And that's when the thought hit me. I hadn't thought about doing that. But the thought hit me, I was not prepared, clothing wise, to really mow that part of that yard, was I? Now, the hard plastic seat, no matter what I'm wearing, that's going to make something. Rhonda Ray joked with me, I need to duct tape something. I don't know. But anyway, but the slick pants or what did not help at all in my situation. And so I even texted him back, and this was at some point in this week. I don't even remember now. I think it was this week. I don't think it was last week, but it's kind of confused in my brain. Doesn't matter. But I sent back, maybe I could title it "Be Prepared." So here we are. So that's what kind of was on my heart. And I am very thankful I didn't get hurt. Thank God mowers have that safety. They cut off, and I slid to the opposite side of the blade. But I mean, I thumped that ground. In 1 Peter 3:15. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts. And the next two words kind of became a premise for the lesson based on that little funny incident. And so Brother Kendall helped me with my lesson this week and didn't know it. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts and be ready. Those two simple words are very powerful. They go much deeper. Now, my situation is kind of a common sense lesson learned. Okay, lesson learned. One great lesson is I'm not sure how much concerned I am about trying much more of that section, and I think it's going to be all right. But to be ready, and it continues on, always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear, and certainly to be ready to give an answer for what we feel to be true and for what we experience. But those two words, be ready. And we've all faced life situations where we were prepared. You can be as prepared as you understand to be, but then you find out you weren't quite ready for some surprise situations. You plan a family dinner, but your oven messes up. Now, would that not be a pain? You plan to mow, but it rains most of the week. Well, thank God for the rain. You plan to catch up on laundry, only to find out you open the detergent. I'm sure this stuff never happens to y'all, right? You plan to catch up on laundry, you go open the detergent bottle. Oh, you just want to smack a puppy because it's almost empty. You were not prepared. It makes you so mad. You're like, it's almost out of detergent. But these life situations, they happen to you, don't they? I mean, that's just life. Life happens to you. It's just an aspect of living. But the thing that makes me think about it, when I thought about it, those things just happen. But some things can be more avoidable. For example, I did not think through that a seat made of slick plastic with a big guy wearing slick pants does not equal a prime setting for him to mow a steep section of a yard. Duh. I mean, you just live and learn. Lesson learned for sure. But there are situations where maybe I'm just not prepared. And you try to be careful. And I mean, those life situations will happen. You can be as prepared as possible, but then things happen. But then I think about it, maybe I've not prioritized some circumstances as well as I should have. It's easy to be ready when you have things prioritized correctly, when you make allowances for things. If I have shot off days and just that weren't bad weather, and then I say, I'll just mow tomorrow. It's easy to do things like that. And then I don't look at the forecast, and it's forecast to rain every other day, and I've missed my window. Then I didn't prioritize. So how ready am I to tackle today and its events? I cannot predict everything that'll happen, but for me, the thought process about those two words, to be ready, in the sense that I'm walking as close to the Lord as I know and understand to be, and for everybody, there's shades of that, because we're all different people with different understanding. For me to recognize that being ready means I'm leaning on the Lord, and I just can't do this on my own. It's very easy, especially as you become independent adults. You do a lot of things on your own. You take on a lot of responsibilities. I guess there's some aberrations from the norm of people who don't want adulthood and try to avoid responsibility, but that's just sad. But a lot of times you kind of get used to doing things, and you can assume a lot of responsibility. But there is someone much greater than me who understands the situations better than I do. And I have learned as I've aged in those times and in those situations, I may have my own feelings and my own thoughts, but I need to be ready to let him guide me, to let him direct me, that I'm leaning on him, and to understand it's okay to know I'm not doing this on my own. One of the greatest blessings of marriage is having that companionship and help in life. And Rhonda Ray said something recently that meant a lot to me. She's like, now that she's been with me now for a while, she truly understood why it was hard for me to get it. Because for me to understand what marriage could be, because she lived with me now, she recognizes, anybody who knew me, I can be easygoing as much. I try to be easygoing. I don't want the world to be revolving around me. I try to keep that mindset. But at heart, I was a very independent individual in certain respects. And so it was hard for me, for those who've experienced it. You can't force someone to understand something that they may have not experienced on their own. You just can't sometimes. You can't force feed that to somebody. People come to their own conclusions, no matter how much you want it for them. So recently she said to me, I kind of understand now. I see why it would have been hard for you to get it. Because sometimes when you're with someone like she is with me, she sees that there was a lot in life I was just accustomed to doing purely by Danny's way and with Danny alone. And so when someone else enters the picture, that changes the dynamic. But when it's the right one, you understand it's okay to have that person there with you, that I don't have to do it on my own anymore. Now I can embrace that because I understand it. And I use that as an analogy because that's what you want people to realize about if they can lean on the Lord. Be ready. Let him help you be ready for life situations. And I'll read through these pretty quickly. Proverbs 3:6, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. To be truly ready, have to submit the life circumstances and situations to him first. And he'll give me direction and knowledge, and I appreciate that. In Psalm 28:7, the Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusted in him, and I am helped. Therefore, my heart greatly rejoiceth, and with my song will I praise him. It says, the Lord is my strength. It's okay to understand that to be ready, I don't have to be the strong one at that time. I need something greater than me. And I think there is no harm in people seeing that vulnerability. I think, for example, even I don't, have children of my own, but with students sometimes, for them to understand that they were very kind to me when my sister passed away. But I was okay with them letting them know that hurt me, that I'm human, that you have vulnerabilities as a human being. You can't be this stoic, nothing's going to affect me so people don't think I'm weak. That's not even normal. That's a facade. That's not even mentally healthy. You set yourself up to crack, even if it's in private, you're going to have a breakdown. That's just not normal. And so my students were very accustomed to me sharing. They were very kind to me, very loving. I would have a kid. Sometimes I'd open my email and, are you okay, Mr. Eldreth? And they're high schoolers, who don't care. Oh, please. They're just children in bigger bodies. But they knew I cared about them, and they were very kind to me during that process. But it was okay for me to show them that I was hurting, that this was hard, and I needed their support, because that's how you grow as a person. But to give that trust over to God helps you truly be ready for situations. I got a surprise phone call yesterday about a situation that I can't openly share about that took me back pretty bad. And I'm like, okay. So I and my wife and I, what was our reaction? We needed God. For me to be ready to face that situation throughout the rest of the day and later, thankfully, hear good news, and I say praise God for it. I had to have someone much stronger than me. And that's what you want people to realize. Life can be so much better, and you will be ready if you'll just give it to him. He is my strength and my shield. In Psalm 9:10, and they that know thy name will put their trust in thee. For thou, Lord, hast not forsaken them that seek thee. And I appreciate that. I may not always get the answer I want or the answer I want at a certain time, but he doesn't forsake me. If I'm not putting my faith in him, if I'm not understanding that it is my duty to be obedient to him and rely on him when I'm struggling, and if I'm not trusting in him to guide me through those life situations, then I simply cannot be truly prepared for what may come. I've set myself up for potential failure. Because to be ready, I have to realize I need something greater than me in life to make it and to face it. And once I can allow myself to understand that, then that's okay. I have learned in life of when you enter a marriage, you enter compromise. You enter a world of finding what works for not just yourself anymore, but for two people so you can be happy and love each other. And some things in life just aren't worth a struggle or a battle. It's not worth it. My love for her is greater than any little picky thing I might get hung up on, though she may think, oh, really? I haven't known. But I try. And she reciprocates that same care and love to me because it's not all about me and it's not all about her. It's about us. And how are we going to make it and do it together? And you see that in a relationship you enter into with a human being. But if people could understand, you get that in a much greater way with God. You can be ready for life. You can be ready for situations, not that they're easy, not that you want them, not that you've asked for them, but he'll give you the peace that you need because the natural thing to do is you want to take a situation into your own hands. You want to mold that situation. You want to mold the people involved. You want to mold everything into the way you want it to be. The situation I dealt with yesterday, and I know I'm sorry, I cannot openly share. Thank you for not asking me about it. And thank you for understanding that I'm just doing the best I can with what I can say. But my wife was, a little agitated for me in a loving way, thinking because of how something was dealt with. And I said to her, and she appreciated, and I said, well, and she believes this, but she loves me. So what hurts me, hurts who? Sometimes her worse. And so that aspect of this situation, something aggravated her. But here's how I dealt with it, Brother Mark. I said to her, this isn't about me. And she didn't mean it was about me. But because she loves me, she cared how it might be affecting me. But I said, honey, here's how I put it in perspective. And if I choke up, it doesn't bother me, but I'll try to get through it. It wasn't about me. It was about my loved one, someone I love very deeply. It wasn't about me. I don't care about me. All I care about is my loved one gets the prayers they need for the time and the situation they're dealing with right now. Bottom line, that's what matters. I'm human, and something could try to irk me or bother me. But I needed to be ready in that moment in time to understand it wasn't Danny that mattered and how Danny wanted to feel about it and how did I feel like it affected Danny. That's irrelevant. It's immaterial to the greater concern I had for my loved one. My loved one needed prayer. And that's what mattered most. And in that situation, you could be ready to handle it because who helps you? God. God will help you put things in perspective and put it that it's not about me. If life is only about image, certainly how we're perceived and how we interact and how we are with people matters. But there is something, image is surface, right? Image is the surface. What lies underneath that image? That's what validates and makes who you are and what you are and whether you really stand for what you say you represent. Image is a surface. Well, underneath it is the substance, if that makes sense. Hung up on the surface can make you miss out on, are we building the material we need to live a true substance? Is that substance there? And that's what I want. That's what will help you be ready for life's circumstances. Do you have the substance that you need, to the faith that you say you have to stand on it? Because if it's all just about image and look, let me tell you, that stuff can be down pat. But then life happens and everything crumbles and falls apart. And all of a sudden that perfect image is destroyed. What's underneath it is what's going to hold true and help us face life situations. If I'm not trusting him to guide me through it, then I can make it a mess. There are people who seem to go through life with no regard for God and his word. And some of those people even seem quite successful sometimes, don't they? But if these people continue living in such ways, they are not going to be ready when either their time comes to die or if he returns. And that is sad. There may be a surface image that everything is all together. And then everything may look fine on the outside. But if they are not truly ready, then when he returns, they will not be prepared. And that would be my goal in life. I want to be ready or to be prepared for my time and opportunities that come. And certainly when my time comes to exit this world. In Psalm 118:8, it is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. And I think about that verse, and I think that's about as fair as the Bible can be to us, isn't it? Because humans can fail. Is that correct? That's just life. Humans can fail us. If I'm only putting my trust in another person or other people, then I can find myself sorely disappointed at some time in my life because that's just going to happen. There are people you can have tremendous faith in and confidence and all that, I know, and the lives that they live. But ultimately, they still are also human beings. And people can disappoint us. But here's what's most unfortunate sometimes people can idealize other people's lives. I could look at brother so and so or sister so and say, yep, they got it made. Yep, look, it's just all together. But do I really know what that person could be dealing with? I really don't, do I? And then if I hear something they've dealt with or something they've struggled with, oh, I thought they were all perfect. Well, first of all, why'd you set them up for that? That's not fair. That same expectation you would give to someone else who you think has been very, pardon the phrase, human and dealt with things, and you have empathy and sympathy and love for, now you don't want to extend it to somebody you idealized. That's not fair. You set that person up for that. That ain't right. That's not fair. Everybody has their issues. Everybody has their struggles. And people can unfortunately disappoint. But people can also make those things right, just like someone else has. And so you are ready, I hope, you will be ready to offer that same grace and love to them if they need to do it. But people, unfortunately, can upset us. People can make errors. And sometimes it's unintentional. And sometimes people can just be wrong. And I think about, it's true, you think about work, and that's the example that I used as an analogy. You think about work. Blind faith in an individual without discernment can cause you to do some things that may not even be necessary, right? That can happen. Think about it, work. I mean, it can certainly happen in the world of faith and church, for sure. But I just used work I'm using it as an analogy, because this can happen. Someone you trust wholeheartedly shows you how to do something a certain way. Let's just say it's a job task. Later on, you find out, I kind of chuckle because this could happen to somebody. You find out it's actually not exactly right because the way they showed you to do it involved a lot of extra steps that weren't really necessary, which caused you more work. Now, while you're working all that time, you may have felt like this seems a bit much. Maybe you even started to think, I don't know, this seems a little unnecessary, but that's how he showed me. I better do it this way. And you confront the person finally and you say, what's going on? Why all these extra steps? And you know what? The person may respond, I was doing the best I know too. I was trained to do it that way, so that's how I showed you. Isn't that how life can happen? In work, sometimes in other much deeper areas of our life. So God has to give us discernment, doesn't he? That person who trained you at work was human. He did not necessarily mean to lead you astray and cause you extra work. But unfortunately, it happened. But once you have knowledge, you can do differently. You can be ready to do the task in a different way. In Deuteronomy 4:2, ye shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. Again, that coworker you trusted didn't mean to cause you harm. He was just doing the best he knew. But there was something that just didn't seem right to you. And God, and I'm so thankful, can speak to us as individuals and help us. You hear stories sometimes of people coming out of very difficult spiritual situations, and I thought of one. You hear them talk about basically being delivered from scenarios where they were kind of in bondage. And I've heard stories that really broke my heart to think that people have endured what they endured. And they've endured some terrible things. And I heard a brother preach during this, it was a last camp meeting, I was watching it while it was being broadcast. And I heard him, and he was speaking at that camp meeting. And he spoke about how he had attended this camp meeting, and then later he received a call basically being questioned either about why he attended it or maybe even that he had the audacity to speak at it. And you know what? That person that called him, or persons, aren't they probably acting on instructions they'd been taught by someone they trusted? A lot of times that's how it happens, isn't it? But thankfully, the dear brother who was preaching in that camp meeting, through godly discernment, realized that something wasn't quite as it ought to be. And he was able to get deliverance, as we say, right? To come to a greater understanding of truth and using godly discernment to help him understand that he not only it was okay for him to be there, but okay to speak. Because of his faith in God, the one who knows and understands all things, he was prepared. He was ready to fellowship now with a whole new set of people. And it's a blessing not only to interact with that minister, but especially people from that congregation. It is such a blessing. They are such a treat and they're just wonderful. And it's how sad that some things can be, you're not ready for some things that God's totally fine with. Because unfortunately, the devil works so hard, doesn't he, to create confusion in so many areas. But this minister had to be obedient to God first. He had to be prepared to move in the way that God had showed him. He could have easily followed along with things that he'd heard for a long time, right? But God witnessed something greater to his heart. And I assume for much of his life, he may have done things with good, godly intentions. But he chose to do what God said because he was prepared. And I have a limited understanding of that situation. I'm being purposely vague, and I know your mind can go, many of you, to things and maybe even figure out what I'm talking about. But, I'm not affiliated with that. Quite frankly, I don't need to know more. It's not necessary for me to know them, to love them, and care about them, and I'm fine. So I'm not seeking more information either, and I don't question or press. And I'm sure that situation goes significantly deeper than I can comprehend and certainly portray as an example in a lesson. So I just wanted to add that disclaimer. In Deuteronomy 12:32, what things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto nor diminish from it. And this is one thing I thought of as an example after I read that verse. If I were to help a younger or newer teacher, and sometimes I do, it has varied through my career. Sometimes they learn if you listen, they like to come talk to you because they feel like it's very easy when you do a job. I don't know if any of you have ever had to train someone, but if you've ever had to train somebody on your job, I hope you don't just focus on showing them what to do. I hope you show them and say, do you understand why I did this? Do you have anything you notice about it? Because the more you feel heard, the better you actually listen when you're involved in those things. And young teachers are no different. And this is one thing I would tell them. Be overly prepared for your class. Because do you want to know a nightmare for an adult? Dead time in a classroom with children. That is an adult nightmare. If you are not a good disciplinarian, and a lot of times young ones are learning that, and you don't have control of the classroom, and now it's 10 minutes, and class is almost over, but you got 10 minutes and you finished your whole lesson. That can be utter. You just have to trust me if you don't get it. It can cause chaos. Now, 2 minutes before class is out, 2 boys are in the office because they got in a tiff on the bus. Well, that little 10 minutes allowed time for them to squimish back and forth. And before you knew it, one gets up to sharpen his pencil and he pops the other one in the back of the head. Now, you giggle. It can spiral fast. Dead time is not your friend if you teach children. Now, if you are older, sometimes you've got some strategies and things you can use. If nothing else, I can just talk to mine. But I'm old. There's a little different level of ability sometimes to finagle that, but it doesn't always mean it'll work for me either. But that teacher begins to feel, do you know what that 10 minutes enhances in that teacher? It's not funny. You don't want to laugh with the new teacher. I giggle because, it can just distress them. I've seen a girl in the hallway crying, an adult teacher crying in the hallway as I've walked down the hall. She's out there crying. It can distress them. They start to feel every insecurity becomes heightened. Oh no, I couldn't get them to quiet down last week when I was doing my lesson. What am I going to do now? It's 10 minutes left. It heightens every insecurity the poor thing probably has in their body. But the teacher also, on the flip side, can't just make stuff up. Sometimes you can do things on the fly. That's what experience can bring, and it helps out a lot. But I also think about this. If a student asks a question, sometimes in that dead time, you might say, do you have any questions? Hoping something will crop up that you can move on with. And a student asks a question and the teacher's uncertain. Guess what some people will do if they don't know? They make stuff up. Now, don't act like you've not been in a setting where someone answered because they didn't want to sound stupid. And they create, Rhonda, they create an answer. Maybe I better be careful asking her questions. How do I look? Oh, there's where she's been doing all that. But if a student asks a question and the teacher's uncertain, you don't make something up. You're just going to let it bite you in the tail later if you're not careful. It's okay to tell students, I'm not sure, buddy, so let me get back to you. But try the best you can to get back to them. But some people battle, they don't want to sound like they don't know what they're talking about. And they formulate an answer because they want to save face, right? But this can come back to bite a person. What things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto nor diminish from it. Spiritually speaking, that could be especially dangerous, couldn't it? Now, I know we're having fun talking about my job situation and stuff, but in the spiritual realm, that could be dangerous. And so my goal for me, I don't mind saying to someone, I'm not sure, let me get back. That's maturity, isn't it? Because it's okay to not know something, but it's not good because I'm not prepared for that, or I wouldn't even have known to be prepared for that question from a friend or from a family member, that I just make something up. To be prepared to live for him, I need his instruction, but I also need to be careful not to take away from and to not add to it. The Bible is, I think, it's as fair as it can be to us. Some people, in an effort to be ready for God, I don't know if you've ever witnessed this. I can think of maybe some examples in my lifetime that I've seen. And we all experience things personally too sometimes. In an effort for people to be ready, and they really often are very honest and devout, they can almost make their lives miserable. I heard a dear sister who has a wonderful experience. I have all faith in her that I know of. She's wonderful. Years and years ago, she was much younger, obviously. She said salvation did not bring joy to her because it just became an obsession. Was she doing something wrong, I think? And yet the devil knows if you're not going to do certain things, so why not torment you in the other realm? He can try to make it as unlivable as possible. And sometimes humans can add to that if they're not careful, unfortunately. I need to be careful to make sure that I am ready. But sometimes these people, they make their life miserable. They become almost, for the sake of the example, fanatical and paranoid of doing something wrong. They paranoid their life. They overcritique everything. Everything could be this or everything can be that. Look, you can turn anything into something wrong if you think about it hard enough. I mean, come on, right? I mean, you can obsess so much over a diet, you could get yourself to where you only eat 3 things because you've made your life paranoid and miserable. And that's not how God wants us to live. But if not careful, sometimes people, in an effort that they think the devil can't work on them in one way, so he works on them into another. They add so many restrictions to their own life, they make their experience unlivable. And I'm not talking about God showing them something. That's not what I'm referring to. But God forbid they try to tell others then that that's how they live and how it needs to be. Then what you notice is sometimes that existence really isn't from the Lord. And if the devil knows he can't get them to be too loose, then God forbid he'll make them be so stringent upon themselves. They've created these self-induced rules that their life feels unbearable and miserable because the devil is real, isn't he? And they are so tormented, thinking they're trying to live right. And I mean, it's just awful. And really, I'm not trying to be silly. You don't know what the human mind can be dealing with. Someone says to that person, that purple looks nice on you. And you know what the devil will do? You're being prideful. You got a comment about that 2 months ago, didn't you? You wore that for a compliment only. You might make someone look at you. And now that poor soul's determined they can't wear purple. That's torment. And that's torment. And I'm just saying, we have to be careful as individuals. We don't add to that. I try to be very cautious sometimes in settings that I share what I may feel I battle or struggle because I don't want to put that off on someone else. I'm not talking about testifying in an appropriate setting or situation or talking to someone who knows you well. But there are certain things I try to be very, very cautious what I share and what I say because sometimes the devil can just use the most mundane thing to be like, oh, whoa, he's a freak. I don't want nothing to do with that. That man's a freak. I don't want nothing to do with if that's going to drive, that's brainwashing. That's just going to drive you crazy. That ain't going to make you spiritual. You're just going to be crazy. But I could add to that if I'm not cautious. I don't add to it or take away from it. There is a balance that the Bible will give. And sharing to someone you trust and you say, hey, I've had this thought. Do you think that's different? Someone who knows you and you trust. Because I've heard well-meaning people share things they've thought about. And I'm thinking, oh my word, you poor thing. You're going to drive yourself crazy. You're going to drive yourself crazy. I don't say that to them because that may not be what they need to hear. Plus, they didn't really ask me my opinion. There's people who love to share what they think and say, but they never ask you what you think. You ever notice that? There are people who share. This is how it made me feel. This is what I think. This is how it happened. This is how I'm dealing with it. This is what is going on. But they never say, do you have any thoughts about it? I've learned they probably don't want to hear it. They've already predetermined in their mind what they think and feel, and they've self-justified. And I kind of leave it alone. But that's just me. That was free. So the devil is working on this person, and he's making their life. That poor soul now is to the point they're miserable. The devil is a tormentor. Deuteronomy 12:32, what things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it. That tormented soul can get so miserable because the devil's trying to drive them crazy that what ultimately happened. Now, he couldn't get them to be too loose, but he could get them to be fanatical. What happens now with the fanaticism once it wears you down? The same goal was accomplished. They give up. They give up because it's not livable, because it's not really from God. It's something that they've got in their own mind, unfortunately. The person feels their life is unlivable and that they're a failure. So if I can't succeed at it, why try? And now the person is unprepared. I'm thankful God gives balance. He doesn't want loose living. He doesn't want us to be easy come, easy go about everything. He has expectations for us to live by, but the devil can make a mess if we let him. In an effort to feel fully ready and fully prepared, that tormented individual was heaping a load of self-made expectations on him or herself that were not even from God. God didn't want that for the person. He wants balance. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, it was Brother Liam in Whitehead. Either I heard him say it or I heard someone reference it or both. I can't remember. But this was associated in my head with him. He would use the example. When you align a car, you go too far in either direction, guess what? It's out of line. Either direction, it's out of line. I don't want to be unprepared because I'm too far away, and I don't want to drive myself crazy because I'm giving ear to the enemy in a different way. I think of an individual I have met on occasion who I think, I don't know for sure, but this is the impression I get. They are very tormented, I think. If I had to guess, the person battles some mental health issues and really needs medical intervention, needs to adhere to some medical intervention that God has provided to help people. That's my opinion. And I don't know if they're getting it. But the individual is miserable and God doesn't want us to live that way. I'm thankful I can be happily prepared. Proverbs 3:13. Happy is the man that findeth what? Wisdom. And the man that getteth understanding. I can learn lessons like my mowing incident, but I'm also thankful I can depend on God to help me attain other understanding so I can be prepared. Brother Mark.
Really good. Really good. A lot of things to think about being prepared and in everything that we do, and be a light before the world that they can see that living a life that God has got planned for us is a joyous thing, that it brings forth. It'll put a smile on your face. Don't mean everything goes smooth all the time, but how we handle things and how we deal with things. You know, Brother Danny could have slid off that lawnmower and said, I'm never getting back on that again. And he sure did get out of shape real quick. So, you know, how we handle things, how we handle situations. And that's a really good lesson this morning. We'll take a little bit of a break and then we'll move on to the service shortly.